The magnetic storm did not howl. It did not scream like the organic winds that tore through the upper spires of Vera Ascendant. Down here, in the bowels of the city, in the tangled guts of Rustlight Alley, the storm hummed. It was a low, resonant vibration that made a man's teeth ache and caused gravity to lose its absolute authority. Milton slammed his magnetic boots onto the floor plating, feeling the satisfying clack of the clamps engaging. The rest of his workshop, however, was having a disagreement with physics. "Get down, you stubborn piece of junk," Milton grunted, wrapping a thick rubberized cable around his forearm. Floating at eye level in the center of the room was a commercial-grade cryo-fridge. It drifted lazily to the left, bobbing like a cork in water, its heavy compressor humming in confusion. The storm's interference had reversed the local polarity of the unit's grounding plate. It was a 300-pound metal box, acting like a balloon. Milton hauled on the cable. The fridge groaned, but refused to descend. He was a man of 30 years, with grease permanently etched into the fingerprints of his left hand, and a burn scar running up his right forearm, a souvenir from a plasma manifold that had disagreed with his wrench. He was not handsome in the classical sense, but he had a face that looked reliable, the way a good hammer looks reliable. "Stay," he commanded, looping the cable around a heavy stanchion bolted to the floor. The fridge strained against the tether hovering 2 feet off the ground, rotating slowly. Milton wiped his hands on a rag that was dirtier than the hands themselves. This was his life, fixing things that the universe or the city's erratic magnetic field had decided to break. He preferred machines. Machines had manuals. Machines did not lie. Machines did not look at you with disappointment. The chime above the workshop door rang. It was a delicate electronic sound entirely out of place, amidst the grinding noise of the alley outside. Milton sighed, tossing the rag onto a workbench. "We are closed," he called out, not looking back. "Unless you have a credit stick with 5 figures on it, in which case we are open. But I am in a bad mood." "Mister," a voice said. It was soft trembling, but possessed a core of iron. "Can you fix something that is completely broken?" Milton turned. Standing in the doorway framed by the neon-purple smog swirling in the alley was a girl. She could not have been more than 12 years old. She wore a hooded cloak made of fabric that seemed to absorb the grime of the workshop, without getting dirty, nano-weave expensive upper spire quality. But the hood had slipped back, revealing hair the color of starlight, and 2 triangular feline ears that were currently flattened against her skull in exhaustion. She was felinoid, one of the high blood species. Her eyes were wide golden discs, with vertical slit pupils that dilated as they adjusted to the gloom of his shop. She clutched a bundle of cloth to her chest, as if it contained the crown jewels. Milton leaned back against a workbench, crossing his arms. He looked at the floating fridge, then back at the girl. "Depends," he said dryly. "Does it bite?" The girl blinked. She did not smile. "No, it is dead." She walked forward. Her movements were graceful but heavy, as if the air around her was thicker than it should be. She placed the bundle on the nearest clear surface, a table covered in scattered microchips, and unfolded the cloth. Inside lay a mechanical hair. Milton whistled low. It was not a toy. It was a work of art. The casing was brushed platinum, engraved with flowery script that no one in Rustlight Alley could read. The joints were seamless, likely magnetic suspension. This was a hunting hare, a training droid for royal children to practice their reflexes. It was worth more than Milton's entire shop, including the floating fridge. "You are a long way from the sky, kid," Milton said, his eyes narrowing. "Did you steal this?" The girl's tail twitched under her cloak. "No. It is mine. It fell. It stopped moving." She looked up at him, and for a second, Milton saw a desperation so raw, it made him want to look away. "Please. It is the only thing that listens to me." Milton picked up the hair. It was heavy. He popped the ventral hatch with a thumbnail. The interior was a mess of shattered crystal pathways and fused gears. The magnetic storm outside had likely fried its logic core, and the impact had done the rest. "The logic crystal is cracked," Milton diagnosed, his voice falling into the flat rhythm of his trade. "The primary servo is seized. To fix this, I would need to bypass the manufacturer locks, which is illegal, rewrite the movement algorithm from scratch, which is tedious, and weld the casing back together without melting the platinum, which is nearly impossible." He looked at her. 3,000 credits, up front. He expected her to leave. He wanted her to leave. Rich kids brought trouble. Royal-looking rich kids brought the kind of trouble that ended with an execution squad. The girl reached into her pocket and slammed a heavy pouch onto the table. It clinked with the sound of pure rhodium coins. 5,000, she said, "if you do it now, and if you do not ask my name." Milton looked at the money. Then he looked at the hair. Then he looked at the girl. "Grab that stool," Milton said, pulling a magnifying loupe over his eye. "And do not touch the floating fridge. It has a temper." For the next hour, the only sounds in the shop were the hiss of Milton's laser soldering iron and the rhythmic humming of the storm outside. The girl sat perfectly still, her golden eyes tracking the movement of his hands. She did not fidget like a human child. She sat with the predatory patience of her species. "You are good," she said suddenly. "I am adequate," Milton corrected, working a microscopic gear into place with tweezers. "Juno down the street is good. I am just stubborn." "Stubborn is good," she said. "Stubborn stays when things get hard." Milton paused. He glanced at her over the rim of his lenses. "You talk like an old woman." "I feel like one today," she replied. A small smile touched her lips, fleeting and fragile. "If you make it live again, I will not sue you for looking at royal trade secrets." "Generous of you," Milton snorted. "Hand me that sonic screwdriver." "No, the small one." She handed it to him. Her fingers brushed his. Milton froze. Her skin was cold. Not cool cold. And for a split second, where her finger touched his, he felt nothing. Not numbness, but an absence of sensation. As if her finger wasn't quite there. He looked at her hand. For a heartbeat, the tips of her fingers seemed to blur, turning into a smoky haze before snapping back into solid focus. Fading. Milton's stomach dropped. He knew the rumors. Everyone in the lower city knew the rumors. The electromagnetic atmosphere of Vera Ascendant was toxic to certain high-altitude physiologies if they weren't shielded. It didn't kill the body immediately. It unraveled the bioelectric field that held their consciousness to their matter. They didn't die. They faded. They became ghosts while still breathing until the wind just blew them apart. "Kid," Milton said, his voice rougher than he intended. "How long have you had the cough?" She pulled her hand back quickly, hiding it in her cloak. "I do not have a cough." As if the universe enjoyed dramatic timing, she doubled over, hacking violently. It wasn't a wet, organic cough. It sounded like static discharge, a dry, crackling sound that made the lights in the shop flicker. Milton dropped the screwdriver. He grabbed her shoulder to steady her, and again, he felt that sickening lack of resistance, like grabbing a handful of mist that was pretending to be solid. "You are sick," Milton said. "You need a bioarchitect, not a mechanic." The girl gasped, recovering her breath. She wiped her mouth. There was no blood, only a faint, shimmering residue like diamond dust. "Doctors cannot fix this," she whispered. "It is genetic, a flaw in the bonding sequence, just expired shelf life." She looked at the hair on the table. Milton had finished the circuit. "Turn it on," she commanded softly. Milton hesitated, then flipped the switch on the hare's belly. The mechanical creature shuddered. Its eyes, tiny sapphires, flared to life. It kicked its rear legs, shook its metallic head, and hopped once-twice before landing in the girl's lap. It nuzzled against her stomach, letting out a mechanical purr. The girl laughed. It was a small, broken sound, but It was genuine. She stroked the metal ears. "See," she said, her voice wet. "You fixed it. You made it stay." "It's a machine," Milton said, wiping his hands to hide the tremor in them. "Machines are easy. People are complicated." "I need you to fix one more thing," she said. She reached into her cloak again. This time, she did not bring out money. She brought out a document. It was thick, stamped with the holograms of the High Custodian's office. The paper glowed faintly in the dim light. She slid it across the table. Milton read the header: Interspecies Guardianship and Familial Bonding Request. He looked up. "Is this a joke?" "Everyone refused," she said, her voice rushing, now losing its royal composure. "The Duke of the Third Spire, my uncles, even the royal advisors. They saw the fading. They saw the politics. They said it was too much risk for a diminishing asset." She placed a hand on the paper. "I need a signature. One signature from a sentient adult citizen of Vera. That is the law. If I have a designated guardian outside the direct line of succession, the custodian cannot take me to the Institute." Milton backed away. He actually took a step back, knocking into his workbench. "Who are you?" "Leona," she said. "My mother is Queen Isolde." Milton felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't just trouble. This was a death sentence. The Queen was currently undergoing the air bonding audit. The entire city was watching it on the news feeds. If she failed to prove a familial bond, the High Custodian took the air. That was the ancient law. "You are the princess," Milton whispered. "And you are dying. And you want me, a grease monkey in Rustlight Alley, to sign a paper claiming I am your what stepfather guardian?" "Family," Leona corrected. "I just need someone to say I belong to them. So I do not belong to the state." "No," Milton said firmly. "Absolutely not. Take your rabbit and get out. I do not do politics. I do not do royalty. And I definitely do not do kids." "Please," Leona said. She did not cry. She looked at him with those terrifyingly old eyes. "I do not have much time. I can feel the pieces of me leaving." "Get out!" Milton pointed to the door. The door hissed open. But it wasn't Leona leaving. It was a mountain of rusted metal entering. Sigma 9 had to duck to get through the frame. He, if one could assign gender, to a walking pile of pre-war scrap, was an obsolete Royal Guard unit. His armor, once white and gold, was now pitted with corrosion and patched with sheet metal. One of his optical sensors was stuck in zoom mode, whirring constantly. "Alert," Sigma 9 announced. His voice sounded like a gravel mixer. "Proximity warning. Royal asset located in Sector Squalor." He stepped into the room, the floorboards groaning under his weight. He swiveled his head, the stuck lens zooming in and out on Milton's face. "Target identified male, human. Occupation tinkerer. Hygiene status critical failure." Sigma 9 turned to Leona. "Princess, this environment contains 12,000 distinct pathogens, and a floating refrigerator. My logic processors are struggling to find a reason for your presence." "Sigma, hush," Leona snapped. "He fixed the hair." Sigma 9 looked at the hair. "Reparation verified. Quality surprisingly adequate." He turned back to Milton. "Did you attempt to steal the royal asset?" "I am trying to kick the royal asset out," Milton yelled. Sigma 9 processed this. "Rejection of royal company. Treasonous but statistically consistent with your socio-economic demographic. You fear the High Custodian." "I fear being executed," Milton retorted. "Cowardice," Sigma 9 noted, as if dictating a file. "However, survival instinct is rated at 90%. Princess, we must return. The electromagnetic shielding in your suit is degrading. The storm is worsening." Leona stood up. She looked small next to the giant robot. She looked at Milton one last time. "My mother loves me," Leona said, her voice quiet. "But she is a queen first. She has to follow the protocols. She has to pass the audit. If she fails, Ryden takes me. And inside the Institute there is no one to hold your hand when you fade. She pushed the papers toward him. Keep them, just in case you decide to stop being afraid. I am not keeping them, Milton said. Come, Princess, Sigma-9 intoned, placing a massive, gentle hand on her shoulder. I have detected a nutrient paste vendor nearby. We can acquire sustenance before we return to the cage, the palace. Leona pulled her hood up. She scooped up the mechanical hair. Thank you for the repair, Mr. Milton, she said. And then she was gone. Sigma-9 lingered for a second. He looked at Milton, his one good eye glowing a soft blue. For the record, the robot rumbled, your fatherhood potential is calculated at 0.03%. But your ability to fix broken things is statistically significant. The robot turned and lumbered out into the alley, vanishing into the purple fog. Milton stood alone in the silence. The storm outside was picking up the hum, becoming a vibration that rattled the tools on the walls. He looked at the table. The pouch of rhodium coins was there, a fortune. Enough to buy a new shop. Enough to move to the middle tier. And next to it, the papers. He reached out to throw them in the incinerator. That was the smart thing to do, the safe thing to do. But his hand stopped. He looked up at the ceiling. The magnetic storm was passing overhead, and for a moment the gravity in the room shifted again. The floating fridge drifted higher, bumping gently against the rafters. Milton felt a phantom weight in his chest. A memory of a different time, a different loss, a different injustice that he had buried under grease and cynicism. He picked up the papers. The paper felt warm, or maybe his hand was just cold. Stupid, he whispered to the empty room. This is incredibly stupid. He didn't sign them. He couldn't. Not yet. But he opened a drawer in his workbench, the one where he kept the things he couldn't bear to fix but couldn't bear to throw away, and he slid the papers inside. He walked over to the floating fridge and yanked hard on the cable, forcing it down to the ground. It hit the floor with a heavy thud, finally obeying the laws of physics. Stay, Milton said again. But as he looked out the window at the swirling neon sky of Vera Ascendant, he knew it was too late. The gravity had shifted. Something massive had entered his orbit, and no amount of pulling on a cable was going to make his world stand still again. The second time Leona entered the workshop, she brought a portable heater that she claimed was displaying personal animosity toward her. It hums in a tone that is mocking, she insisted, placing the pristine high-end thermal unit on Milton's grease-stained counter. She looked less terrified than the day before, though the dark circles under her golden eyes were like bruises on a peach. And it turns off exactly when I get comfortable. It is a rude machine. Milton looked at the heater. Then he looked at the girl. He had not slept well. The papers she had left were currently shoved into the back of his bottom drawer, beneath a pile of decommissioned power cells, but their presence felt radioactive. Machines are not rude, Milton grumbled, picking up a screwdriver. They are just literal. You probably set the eco-timer to 20 minutes. I did no such thing, Leona said, climbing onto the high stool that she had apparently claimed as her throne. I think it just hates me. Like the automatic doors at the palace, or the royal tutors. Milton opened the casing. The timer was indeed set to 20 minutes. He did not point this out. Instead, he disabled the timer circuit entirely and recalibrated the heating coil to run at a steady warm hum. It had a logic conflict, Milton lied smoothly. I had to explain to it who was in charge. Thank you, Mr. Milton, she said. She did not leave. The third time she came, it was with a datapad that refused to remember poetry. The fourth time, it was a music box that sang in the wrong key. By the fifth day, she stopped bringing excuses. She just brought herself. Rustlight Alley was not a place for children, let alone royal ones. It was a canyon of scrap metal and neon, where the air tasted of ozone and regret. But Leona seemed to treat Milton's workshop like a bunker. Outside, the magnetic storms raged, and the political pressure of the air bonding audit mounted. Inside, there was only the smell of lubricant and the steady rhythm of work. "You are holding the spanner wrong," Milton said one afternoon. Leona froze. She was trying to loosen a bolt on a salvaged thruster Milton was stripping for parts. Her small hands were white-knuckled around the tool. "I am holding it firmly," she argued. "You are choking it," Milton corrected. He walked over, wiping his hands on his coveralls. He stood behind her, reaching around to adjust her grip. "It is not a weapon, Leona. It is an extension of your arm. If you fight the metal wins. You have to ask it to move." He guided her hand. "Feel the tension right there. That is the bolt talking to you. It is saying it is rusted. If you force it, it snaps. You have to wiggle it, persuade it." Leona bit her lip, concentrating. She applied gentle rocking pressure. With a sharp creak, the bolt gave way and turned. Her face lit up. It was a transformation that always caught Milton off guard. One moment, she was a dying alien princess, carrying the weight of a solar system. The next, she was just a kid who had solved a puzzle. "I did it," she whispered. "Don't get cocky," Milton said, moving back to his own bench. "There are 40 more on that casing." "I will persuade them all," she declared. The bell above the door chimed, and Juno walked in. Juno was a scavenger who ran the optics shop 3 doors down. She had hair dyed a violent shade of blue, and a cynical attitude that rivaled Milton's own. She stopped dead in the doorway, staring at the scene, the royal child covered in smudge marks, dismantling a thruster, and Milton supervising like a grumpy master craftsman. "Well," Juno said, leaning against the doorframe, "I didn't know you were expanding the business. Opening a daycare center, are we?" Milton did not look up from the circuit board he was soldering. "She is labor. I am exploiting her for free part stripping," Juno snorted. She walked over to Leona and inspected the thruster. "Nice torque control, kid. Usually when Milton tries to teach someone, they leave crying within 10 minutes. "He yells internally," Leona said seriously. "I can hear it. But his hands are patient." Juno looked at Milton. Her eyebrows raised so high, they disappeared into her hairline. "His hands are patient. Are we talking about the same Milton? The one who threw a wrench through a window because a gyro wouldn't calibrate?" "That was a structural failure of the window," Milton muttered. "It shouldn't have been in the way of the wrench." Juno laughed, a rasping sound that fit the alley perfectly. But as she turned to leave, her expression softened. She caught Milton's eye and tilted her head toward Leona. It was a look of warning and acknowledgement. "You are getting attached," the look said. "This is going to hurt." "Watch yourself, Milton," Juno said softly. "High-quality parts like that usually come with a high-maintenance warranty." "I am just fixing user errors," Milton replied, but he didn't meet her eyes. The chaperone was always there, of course. Sigma 9 did not fit inside the shop comfortably, so he usually stood in the corner, hunched over like a gargoyle made of rusted battleship plating. The ancient machine had become a fixture, a silent sentinel who monitored the air quality and made unsolicited comments about efficiency. "Princess," Sigma 9 rumbled, his voice box static heavy. "Current time is 1800 hours. The probability of Queen Isolde noticing your absence has crossed the threshold of highly likely into imminent catastrophe." Leona did not look up from the pile of gears she was sorting. 5 more minutes, Sigma. This gear train is tricky." "You said 5 minutes exactly 20 minutes ago," Sigma noted. "My internal chronometer is calibrated to atomic standards. You are distorting time." "Milton says time is relative when you are working," Leona countered. Sigma turned his zooming optical sensor toward Milton. "Did you instruct the royal heir in relativistic physics to justify tardiness?" "I said work makes the day go fast," Milton said. She extrapolated. Sigma 9 processed this. A vent on his shoulder hissed, releasing a puff of steam. Acceptable logic. However, I must protest. My primary directive is your safety. This establishment violates 14 safety codes. There are exposed wires. There are sharp edges. There is a distinct lack of nutritional options. But it is quiet here, Sigma, Leona said softly. The robot went silent. His sensors whirred as he scanned the girl. The reading was likely not good. The fading was unpredictable, but stress accelerated it. In the palace, Leona was constantly under the microscope. Here, amidst the junk, her bio readings were probably the most stable they had been all day. Correction, Sigma-9 said, his voice dropping an octave. My chronometer appears to have been malfunctioning. It seems we have another 10 minutes before the imminent catastrophe protocol initiates. Milton suppressed a smile. You should get that checked, heavy metal. Glitches are dangerous. Indeed, Sigma agreed. I will schedule a diagnostic, eventually. But the lightness of the afternoons always faded when the reality of Leona's condition made itself known. It happened in small ways. She would reach for a tool, and her hand would pass through it for a fraction of a second before solidifying. Or she would be laughing and suddenly the sound would cut out, as if her vocal cords had momentarily ceased to exist in this dimension. Milton needed answers. He couldn't ask Leona. She lied to protect him. So he went to the one person in the sector who couldn't afford to lie. Dr. Halden's clinic was 2 levels down in the sump. It was a place where people went when they couldn't afford the sparkling medbays of the upper spires. Halden was a woman who looked like she had been awake for a decade. She sat behind a desk cluttered with old-fashioned paper files and illegal bioscanners. You are asking about the fading, Dr. Halden said, not looking up from her microscope. Why, you don't have the genetics for it, Milton. You are pure mutt-human. A friend, Milton said. Just explain the mechanics to me, hypothetically. Halden stopped. She swiveled her chair around. She had sharp eyes that dissected him faster than his own scanners dissected an engine. It is a dissociation of consciousness from matter, Halden said bluntly. Think of the body as a hardware casing and the soul, or consciousness, whatever you want to call it, as the software signal. In these high-blood alien species, the signal is broadcast on a frequency that interferes with our city's magnetic storms. If the bond between the signal and the casing isn't strong enough, the storm washes it away. How do you strengthen the bond? Milton asked. Shielding drugs. Those are Band-Aids, Dr. Halden said. The only thing that permanently anchors the signal is biofeedback loops. Emotional grounding. They need to feel tangible. They need a reason to stay in the casing. Stress, fear, and isolation weaken the signal. Connection strengthens it. It is literally the power of love. Milton, as stupid and unscientific as that sounds. If the patient feels they do not belong here, physics agrees with them and erases them. Milton felt a cold knot in his stomach. And if they are alone, surrounded by people, but alone? Then they fade, Halden said. Fast. The body gives up because the mind has already left. She leaned forward. Milton, if you have a friend with this condition in the sump, tell them to go home. We can't fix that here. She is home, Milton muttered, standing up. That is the problem. When he returned to the workshop, Leona was sitting at his desk. She wasn't fixing anything. She was writing. The shop was dim, lit only by the work lamps. She was hunched over a piece of scrap paper, a stylus moving rhythmically across the surface. She was so focused, she didn't hear him enter. Milton walked up behind her. He expected to see a drawing, maybe a doodle of the mechanical hair. Instead, he saw his name, Milton. Milton of Rustlight. Guardian Milton. Father. She had written it over and over again in different styles, practicing, trying to make the handwriting look adult, trying to make it look like his. Next to the scrap paper was the official custodian document. She had filled out almost everything. The dates, the clauses, the biological markers. The only blank space was the signature line at the bottom. You are forging official documents, Milton said. His voice was flat, devoid of the anger he expected to feel. Leona jumped. The stylus clattered to the floor. She spun around, her eyes, wide panic flaring so hot that her left ear became translucent for a second. I was just practicing, she stammered. In case you were busy. Or your hand hurt. Leona, Milton said, pulling up a chair and sitting opposite her. That is a federal crime. If the custodian catches you doing this, they won't just take you away. They will erase me, digitally and physically. I know, she whispered. She looked down at her hands. I am sorry. Why? Milton asked. Why me? There are thousands of people in this city. Lords, dukes, people with money, people who can actually protect you. Leona looked up. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't cry. They don't see me. What does that mean? The lords see a political asset, she said, her voice trembling. The dukes see a liability because of the sickness. My mother sees a reflection of herself that she has to polish. She reached out and touched the wrench lying on the desk. You look at things that are broken, and you do not ask what they are worth. You ask what is wrong with them. You fix the hunting hare not because it was expensive, but because it was in pain. You look at me, and you don't see a princess. You see a system that is glitching. You just want to patch the leak. She took a breath. I need someone who wants to fix me, Milton, not someone who wants to own me. Milton stared at her. The words Dr. Halden had said echoed in his mind. They need to feel tangible, a reason to stay. You think I can fix you? Milton asked softly. I think you are the only one who has tried, she said. She pushed the papers toward him. It is Plan B. Only Plan B. Mother is in the second stage of the audit tomorrow. If she passes the emotional resonance test, then we are safe. I burn these papers. But if she fails, if the machine says she does not love me enough, then Ryden takes me. Ryden, Milton tested the name. The High Custodian. The man who ran the city's bureaucracy with a terrifying efficiency. He wants the throne, Leona said. He cannot take it while I exist. But if he becomes my guardian, he rules through me until I expire. And he will make sure I expire. Milton felt a surge of rage so sudden and sharp it almost blinded him. It wasn't the abstract anger he felt toward the government. It was personal. It was the memory of a younger Milton standing in a similar office, watching a similar official stamp a paper that tore his own life apart. There were others, Leona admitted quietly. Before I came to you, I asked my uncle. I asked the captain of the guard. What did they say? My uncle said it would be cruel to prolong my suffering, Leona said. She recited the words as if she had memorized them. He said, better let the poor thing fade and leave us with a clean memory than a messy reality. He called me a messy reality. Milton stood up. He picked up the heavy steel wrench from the desk and hurled it across the room. It smashed into a pile of scrap metal with a deafening clang that made the walls shake. Leona didn't flinch. She watched him. Clean memory, Milton hissed. He paced the small floor. That is what they call it, murder by neglect, and they call us the savages down here. He turned to her. He placed his hands on the desk, leaning in. You are not a mess, Leona. You are a kid, and you are not going to fade because some aristocrat doesn't want to deal with the paperwork. Then promise me, Leona said. If she fails, if the red light comes on at the audit, you sign. Milton looked at the papers. He looked at the blank line that waited for his name. I promise, he said. It was the first time he had made a promise in 10 years. The weight of it settled on his shoulders, heavy and terrifying, but strangely grounding. Leona let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for a week. She stood up and for the first time initiated contact. She wrapped her arms around his waist. It was like hugging a hologram. He could feel the cold seep through his coveralls. He hesitated, then awkwardly patted her shoulder. "Go home," Milton said gruffly. "Sigma is waiting, and eat something real, not that paste." "Yes, Milton," she said. She smiled a real smile that reached her eyes, and then she ran out the door. Milton locked the shop. He turned off the main lights, leaving only the security glow of the monitors. The silence rushed back in, but it felt different now. It wasn't empty. It was waiting. He sat down at his desk and pulled the papers out of the drawer. He laid them flat. He needed to be ready. If he was going to do this, he needed to understand every clause, every loophole. He smoothed the page with his rough hand. Then he saw it. He tilted the page toward the monitor light. Hidden in the fiber of the paper, invisible to the naked eye, unless held at a specific angle against UV light, was a watermark. It wasn't the royal crest. It was a stylized eye inside a gear. The mark of the High Custodian's Private Intelligence Division. These weren't just standard forms Leona had stolen. These were marked, tracked. Someone knew the papers were missing. Someone knew exactly which unique serial number was attached to the princess's Plan B. And if they knew, that they knew where the papers were right now. Milton looked around his dark workshop. The shadows in the corners suddenly seemed deeper. The hum of the fridge sounded like a whisper. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a target. "Well," Milton whispered to the darkness, a grim smile touching his lips as he reached for his plasma cutter. "If they want to come in, I hope they realize this shop has a very strict no refunds policy on damage." He didn't sign the paper yet. Instead, he slid it into a shielded lead box he used for transporting volatile cores. The audit was tomorrow, and Milton had a feeling that fixing a floating fridge was going to seem very easy compared to what was coming next. The vibrations started in the floorboards. It was not the rhythmic, teeth-rattling hum of the magnetic storms that the residents of Rustlight Alley were accustomed to. This was a deep, resonant thrum, powerful enough to make the dust dance on Milton's workbench. The hanging lights swayed violently, casting erratic shadows across the piles of scrap metal. Milton looked up from the diagnostic pad he was holding. Juno, who had been lounging on a crate eating a bag of synthetic chips, stopped chewing. "That is not a storm," Juno said, her voice low. "That is a thruster drive, a big one." "It is a Class A gravitic engine," Sigma-9 announced from the corner. The massive robot's optical sensor whirred as it adjusted focus. "Manufactured by the Royal Shipyards. Probability of structural damage to this alleyway is high. Probability of us being in trouble is certainty." Outside, the alley darkened. It wasn't night yet, but a shadow had fallen over the narrow slit of sky between the towering spires. A sleek obsidian transport ship was descending its anti-gravity repulsors, pushing the smog aside in swirling eddies. It was a shark swimming into a goldfish pond. "Close the shutters," Milton commanded, dropping his tools. "It will not matter," Leona whispered. She was sitting on her usual stool, clutching the mechanical hair. Her face was pale, the translucent quality of her skin more pronounced today. "She found me." The front of the workshop did not explode, but it might as well have. The blast of air from the ship's landing gear blew the heavy iron door wide open, snapping the magnetic lock as if it were made of sugar glass. Dust billowed in. Through the haze, silhouettes emerged. 4 guards in ceremonial armor polished silver that looked ridiculous against the grime of the lower city, stepped in weapons raised. They fanned out, creating a perimeter. Then she entered. Queen Isolde did not walk. She arrived. She wore a cloak that seemed to be cut from the night sky itself, shifting with star patterns as she moved. Her hair was bound in a severe, intricate braid, woven with platinum wire. She was beautiful in the way a glacier is beautiful, sharp cold, and capable of crushing anything in its path. But beneath the makeup and the crown, her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked like a woman who had not slept in 3 days. She scanned the room, her gaze passing over Juno and Sigma-9, as if they were furniture before locking onto Milton. You, she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of orbital bombardment. The mechanic. Your Majesty, Milton said. He did not bow. He wiped his greasy hands on a rag, deliberately taking his time. You are blocking my fire exit. Isolde's eyes narrowed. You have been harboring the heir apparent. You have been soliciting her attention. You have been luring a child into this filth. She walked in, Milton said calmly. I just didn't kick her out. Liar, Isolde hissed. She moved her hand. It was a blur of motion. Something silver flashed through the air. Thwack. A ceremonial dagger, ornate and deadly, buried itself in the wooden support beam, 3 inches from Milton's ear. The handle vibrated with the force of the throw. Milton did not flinch. He looked at the dagger, then back at the Queen. Upper-tier customer service is intense, Juno drawled from the corner, though her hand had drifted toward the hidden stun baton at her belt. That was a warning, Isolde said, stepping forward. The guards tightened their grip on their rifles. The next one will not miss. You are a predator capitalizing on a child's confusion to gain favor with the throne. What is your price, mechanic? Credits. A pardon. A ticket to the upper spire. Mom, stop! The scream tore through the tension. Leona slid off her stool. She scrambled over the debris on the floor, placing herself physically between Milton and the Queen. She spread her small arms wide. Leona, Isolde said, her voice cracking slightly. Step away from him. He is dangerous. He fixed the hair, Leona yelled. It wasn't the voice of a princess trained in court etiquette. It was the shrill, desperate voice of a scared kid. He fixed the heater. He listens to me. You are so busy with the audit and the council and the laws that you only have time to come down here to threaten the person who helps me breathe. Isolde froze. She looked down at her daughter. Leona was shaking. The stress was triggering a reaction. As Milton watched, the edges of Leona's form began to blur. Her hands, outstretched to protect him, became misty, the light from the workshop lamps passing right through them. She coughed that terrible dry static sound and her knees buckled. Leona, Isolde gasped. The Queen's mask shattered. She reached out but stopped short, terrified to touch the fading girl, terrified that her hand would pass through her own child. Milton stepped around Leona and caught her before she hit the floor. His hands were solid. He felt the coldness of her, but he held on. She needs to sit, Milton barked at the Queen. And she needs you to stop shouting. You are destabilizing her biofield. He lifted Leona and placed her back on the stool. He grabbed a blanket. It was an old thermal wrap used for engine insulation, stained with oil but warm, and wrapped it around her shoulders. Isolde watched her hands hovering uselessly in the air. She looked at the grease on the blanket, then at the color returning to Leona's cheeks as the girl leaned into the warmth. Isolde stammered. I did not know it was this bad. Milton turned to face the Queen. He was a head taller than her, but she had the presence of an empire. He didn't care. You want me to stay away, Milton said, his voice low and hard. You throw knives at my head because you think I am stealing her. But look at her, Isolde. Really look at her. You are the Queen of Vera Ascendant. You command fleets. But are you actually close to your daughter, or are you just guarding an asset? The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a starship. The guards shifted uncomfortably. Juno stopped chewing her chips entirely. I am protecting her future, Isolde whispered. The defiance was draining out of her, replaced by a terrifying exhaustion. The audit, if I cannot prove she is worthy. If I cannot prove I am worthy. Analysis, Sigma 9 interrupted. The robot lumbered forward, the floor groaning. Subject, Queen Isolde. Cortisol levels critical. Logic centers compromised by emotional distress. Diagnosis. You are behaving irrationally because you are terrified. Silence, machine, one of the guards barked, stepping forward. No, Isolde said. She held up a hand. She looked at the robot, then at Milton, and finally at Leona, who was clutching Milton's sleeve. He is right. I am terrified. A soft chime echoed through the workshop. It didn't come from the machines. It came from the Queen's wristcom. A holographic projection flickered into existence in the center of the room. It was a face smooth, ageless, with eyes that smiled while the mouth remained cruel. "Hi, Custodian Raiden." "Your Majesty," Raiden's voice was like liquid silk pouring from the speakers. "My sensors indicate you have left the palace. Surely you are not attempting to hide the asset before the final phase of the audit tomorrow." Isolde stiffened. She straightened her spine, pulling the regal mask back on, though it fit poorly now. "I am retrieving my daughter, Custodian." She wandered off. "Wandered off," Raiden mused. The hologram turned, seeming to look directly at Milton. "To the lower sectors." How quaint. "I must remind you, Isolde, that the air bonding audit requires the child to remain within the palace biodomes for the final 24 hours. Any deviation suggests instability. Instability suggests you are unfit." "I am returning now," Isolde said sharply. "Excellent," Raiden said. "We would hate for the council to intervene. I have teams on standby, of course, for the child's safety." The hologram vanished. Isolde stood in the silence. She looked at Leona. "We must go, now." Leona looked at Milton. "But the paper—" "Go," Milton said gently. "Your mom is right. If you are not there, Raiden wins by default." Leona slid off the stool. She left the blanket. She walked to her mother. Isolde hesitated, then reached out and took Leona's hand. It was an awkward grip, stiff and formal, but it was contact. Isolde turned to leave, but she stopped at the door. She looked back at Milton. The anger was gone from her eyes. In its place was something that unsettled him, far more hope. "You asked if I am close to her," Isolde said softly. "I am trying to be. But I do not know how to fix things that are broken." "You don't fix people," Milton said. "You just hold on to them until they pull themselves together." Isolde nodded once. A microscopic movement. Then she swept out into the alley, her guards trailing her, the night sky cloak billowing in the smog. The ship roared to life and ascended, taking the noise and the light with it. "Well," Juno said, exhaling a long breath. "That went better than expected. Nobody died." "Yet," Milton said. He walked over to the wall and yanked the ceremonial dagger out of the wood. The metal was cold. "Raiden knows she was here. He knows she came to me." "So," Juno asked, "you're nobody, Milton. No offense." "To Raiden, nobody is nobody," Milton said. "Everyone is either a tool or an obstacle." Night in Rustlight Alley was never truly dark. The neon signs flickered, pink, green, electric blue, casting long, jagged shadows. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silence that felt heavy, like the air before a lightning strike. Milton was welding. He wasn't fixing anything specific. He was just melting metal because he needed to destroy something. The encounter with Isolde had rattled him. Not the knife, he had been threatened before, but the look in Leona's eyes. The absolute trust. It was dangerous to be trusted. Trust was a debt you had to pay. Clang. A sound from the back vent. Milton killed the torch. He flipped up his visor. Sigma. Sigma 9 was in recharge mode in the corner. His optical sensors dimmed. The robot didn't move. Clang. It was metal on metal. Someone was cutting the maglocks on the rear ventilation hatch. Milton didn't call out. He didn't ask, "Who's there?" He wasn't a hero in a holovid. He was a mechanic in the slums. He reached under his workbench and pulled out a heavy pneumatic bolt driver. It wasn't a weapon strictly speaking. It was designed to drive rivets into starship hulls. But at close range, it could punch a hole through a tank. The rear hatch exploded inward. Smoke grenades rolled across the floor, hissing and spewing thick white gas. "Secure the target," a voice shouted through a filtration mask. "Sweep and clear, no witnesses." They weren't royal guards. They were clad in matte black tactical armor, no insignia. Custodian Black Ops. Milton didn't wait. He kicked the lever on the wall next to him. The workshop's magnetic crane, usually used for lifting engines, swung violently across the room. A 2-ton electromagnet smashed into the first 2 operatives, sending them flying into a stack of sheet metal. "Hostile!" the leader screamed. "Neutralize him!" Laser fire erupted, searing through the smoke. Beams of red light sliced into the walls, melting tools and slagging the diagnostic computers. Milton dove behind the engine block of an old hover racer. He rolled, came up on one knee, and fired the bolt driver. Thump! A 3-inch steel rivet slammed into the shoulder of an attacker, spinning him around. "Sigma, wake up!" Milton roared. The robot's sensors flared red. Sleep mode interrupted. Threat detected. Analyzing intruders possess unauthorized weaponry. Initiating Get Off My Lawn protocol. Sigma 9 stood up, ripping a heavy workbench, bolted to the floor, as if it were cardboard, and hurled it at the door. But there were too many of them. 6, maybe 8. They moved with professional precision. They were flanking Milton, pinning him down. "We are not here for you, grease monkey," the leader shouted. "Where are the papers? The girl left something here." Milton froze. They weren't here to kidnap Leona. They knew she was gone. They were here for the leverage, the signed guardianship request. If Ryden got that, he could prove Isolde was trying to give the heir away to a commoner. It would be treason. "Come and find them," Milton yelled. He grabbed a canister of compressed coolant and hurled it over the engine block. He raised the bolt driver and fired not at the men, but at the canister mid-air. The rivet pierced the tank. Boom. The canister exploded, not with fire, but with freezing cold. A wave of supercooled gas expanded instantly, flash freezing the moisture in the air. 2 operatives were caught in the blast, their armor joints seizing up frost, coating their visors. Milton scrambled back, heading for the lead shielding box where he had hidden the papers. A figure loomed out of the smoke. The leader. He moved fast, slamming the butt of his rifle into Milton's jaw. Milton saw stars. He tasted blood. He hit the ground hard. The leader placed a boot on Milton's chest, aiming the rifle at his face. "The document," the operative said. "Give it up and you live to fix another toaster." Milton spat blood onto the man's pristine black boot. "It's in the roof of the workshop tore open. It wasn't a ship. It was a single figure dropping from the skylight like a falling star. Queen Isolde landed in a crouch between Milton and the gunman. She wasn't wearing the night sky cloak anymore. She was wearing a kinetic combat suit, sleek and silver. She didn't have a weapon. She raised her hand and the air rippled. A pulse of pure kinetic energy slammed into the operative, launching him backward through the air. He smashed into the far wall and crumpled. "You!" Milton wheezed, trying to sit up. Isolde turned. Her hair was loose, wild around her face. "I forgot my gloves," she said, a breathless, frantic excuse. "And I realized I do not trust the custodian to keep his word." The remaining operatives regrouped. "Target is the Queen, set weapons to stun. We can take her." "Get up, Milton!" Isolde shouted. She grabbed a sheet of scrap metal, using her telekinetic amp to hold it up as a shield against a hail of laser fire. Milton scrambled to his feet. He grabbed his welding torch. "You came back. You are supposed to be in the palace." "I am the Queen," Isolde yelled over the noise of battle. "I go where I please, and right now, I am displeased with these people breaking your door." Sigma 9 waded into the fray, swinging a drive shaft like a baseball bat. "Batter up," the robot intoned flatly. It was chaos. It was glorious. The Queen of the Spire and the mechanic of the sump, fighting back-to-back in a smoke-filled workshop. Isolde wielded gravity and force. Milton wielded fire and physics. When the last operative was unconscious, knocked out by a precise application of Sigma 9's fist, silence returned to the alley. Milton leaned against the ruined engine block, gasping for air. Isolde stood amidst the wreckage, her chest heaving, her combat suit scorched. She looked at him. There was soot on her cheek. She looked less like a queen and more like a warrior. "You fight well for a mechanic," she said. "You fight okay for a politician," Milton retorted, wiping blood from his lip. He walked over to the leader of the ops team, who was groaning on the floor. Milton reached down and ripped the helmet off the man. He expected a stranger. He didn't know the face, but he knew the tattoo on the man's neck. It was a barcode burned into the skin. Underneath the code was a symbol, a pair of scales tipped to one side. Milton felt the world tilt. He knew that symbol. 20 years ago, a different apartment, a different set of officials. They had come to take his younger brother away. Unfit environment, they had said. State guardianship is required. The man who had signed the order, the man who had dragged his screaming brother out the door, while Milton, just a boy, was held back by guards, had worn a pin with that exact symbol. It wasn't just the custodian's secret police. It was the Department of Familial Correction, the same department that Ryden had run before he was High Custodian. Milton stared at the tattoo. The memory of his brother's face, forgotten for so long, buried under layers of cynicism, surged back with agonizing clarity. They hadn't just taken his brother. They had erased him. No letters, no visits. Just gone. "Milton." Isolde's voice was concerned. She stepped closer. "What is it?" Milton looked up. His eyes were dry, but they burned with a cold blue fire. "Ryden," Milton said. The name tasted like ash. "This isn't just about the throne, is it? He doesn't just want power. He built this system. He built the machine that eats families." He walked over to the lead box and pulled out the papers Leona had forged. He looked at Isolde. "You have an audit tomorrow," Milton said. "Ryden is going to use every rule in the book to fail you. He is going to try to take Leona just like his men took my brother." Isolde's eyes widened. "Your brother." "He died in the Institute," Milton said. He hadn't known it for sure until this moment, but he felt the truth of it in his bones. "They said it was a training accident. I think he just faded. From loneliness." Milton took a pen from his pocket. He didn't hesitate this time. He didn't shake. He slammed the pen down onto the paper. Milton Vance. He signed his name with a flourish that tore the paper slightly. He handed the document to Isolde. "Here," Milton said. "This is your backup. If he tries to take her, you slam this on the table. It makes me her legal co-guardian. It makes me family." Isolde took the paper. Her hands were trembling. "Milton, this puts a target on your back that I cannot remove." "The target has been there for 20 years, Milton said. He picked up his bolt driver and reloaded it with a fresh clip of rivets. "I just finally turned around to face it." He looked at the unconscious operatives. "Get back to the palace," Milton told the Queen. "Win the audit, but if you don't, I'll be there. And I am bringing my own tools." Isolde looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something forbidden by 300 years of protocol. She reached out and squeezed his dirty, grease-stained hand. "Thank you," she whispered. She activated her suit's recall beacon. A shimmer of teleportation energy surrounded her. In a flash of light, she was gone. Milton stood alone in the wreckage of his life. The shop was destroyed. His anonymity was gone. He was now an enemy of the state. He looked at Sigma 9, who was trying to reattach the workbench to the floor. "Sigma," Milton said. "Yes, Unit Milton." "We are going to the upper spire tomorrow." Sigma paused. "That is outside my operational zone. And your social class. Probability of arrest is 100%. "Good," Milton said, a grim smile spreading across his bruised face. "I have a floating fridge to return to the manufacturer, and I plan to deliver it through the front window." The safe house was not a house at all. It was a decommissioned atmospheric processing station, suspended in the tangled underbelly of the fourth spire, halfway between the Royal Heights and the slums of the sump. The walls were thick lead and reinforced polycarbonate, designed to withstand high pressure, which made it the perfect place to hide from a government that saw everything. Milton sat at a rusted metal table, the only piece of furniture in the room that did not look like it belonged in a museum of industrial failure. In front of him lay the document, the interspecies guardianship and familial bonding request. It was the same paper Leona had tried to get him to sign for weeks. But now, under the harsh white light of the station's emergency glow strips, Milton saw what he had missed in the dimness of his workshop. "The seal," Milton said, his voice flat. "It is crooked." Leona sat on a crate across from him, her legs swinging nervously. She was wrapped in 3 blankets, yet she still shivered. "I did my best," she whispered. Milton ran a finger over the text. The preamble was perfect. The legal jargon was flawless. But the section regarding the waiver of royal immunity, the clause that would allow a commoner to adopt a royal heir, was different. The ink was slightly darker. The font was a micromillimeter off. "You forged the waiver," Milton said. It wasn't a question. Queen Isolde, pacing the perimeter of the room like a caged panther, stopped dead. She spun around, her silver combat suit flashing in the light. "She did what I had to," Leona said, her voice rising with a desperate edge. "The law says a royal heir cannot be claimed by a citizen of the lower tiers, unless the crown explicitly waives the right. You would never waive it, Mother. You are too afraid of the council. So I waived it for you." Isolde walked to the table. She looked at the document. Her face, usually a mask of ice-cold composure, crumbled into something resembling horror. "Leona," Isolde breathed. "This is not just a forgery. This is high treason. If the custodian's clerks scan this document, they will see the digital mismatch in the encoding. They will not just reject it. They will arrest you. They will arrest me for negligence. And they will execute Milton for conspiracy." "I used the encryption key from your private server," Leona argued, tears forming in her golden eyes. "I thought it would match." "It matches the code," Milton said, looking up. "But it does not match the timestamp. You used a key that expired 3 months ago." He looked at the girl. She looked so small inside the mountain of blankets. She had tried to hack a planetary government with the skills of a 12-year-old because she was terrified of being left alone. It was the most heartbreakingly incompetent crime he had ever seen. "It is clumsy," Milton said softly. "It is painfully amateur. The ink bleed on the signature line is visible to the naked eye." "I was shaking," Leona confessed. "My hand wouldn't stop shaking when I wrote it." The room fell silent. The only sound was the hum of the air scrubbers and the rhythmic whirring of Sigma-9's cooling fans. "Analysis," the robot intoned from the corner. "The probability of this document passing a forensic audit is 0.001%. However, the probability of it breaking my optical sensors due to the sheer audacity of its existence is quite high." "Not helping Sigma," Milton muttered. The door to the medical bay hissed open. Dr. Halden stepped out. She had been smuggled in by Juno through a ventilation shaft 2 hours ago. She looked tired. She wiped her hands on a sterile rag and looked at the 3 of them. "We have a problem," Dr. Halden said. She didn't sugarcoat it. She never did. "I have stabilized her biorhythms for now, but the fading is accelerating. The stress of the attack, the flight here and this." She gestured to the tense atmosphere. "This panic is acting like a catalyst." "Give her a booster," Isolde commanded, snapping back into queen mode. "Use the royal reserves. I have brought the vials." "Chemicals are useless, Your Majesty," Dr. Halden said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I told Milton, and now I am telling you. This disease is psychosomatic as much as it is genetic. Her body is trying to reject this reality because her mind does not feel anchored to it. If you put her in front of the audit tomorrow in this state, she will not just fail the test. She will evaporate on the stage. She won't die of the disease first. She will die of fear." Isolde sank onto a bench. For the first time, the Queen of Vera Ascendant looked utterly defeated. I do not know what to do, she whispered. I have followed every protocol. I have hired the best tutors. I have kept her safe from the politics. I have done everything the manual of air rearing dictates. That is the problem, Milton said. He stood up and walked over to the Queen. You are raising a statue, not a daughter. And you are an expert on parenting mechanic, Isolde snapped, her eyes flashing. No, Milton said calmly. But I am an expert on things that are about to break under pressure. And right now you are the pressure. He turned to the table where a bag of takeout food sat greasy noodles Juno had procured from a street vendor. Sit down, Milton told the Queen. I beg your pardon. Sit down, Milton repeated. We are going to eat, and we are not going to talk about the audit. We are not going to talk about the custodian. We are going to talk about noodles. Isolde looked at him, as if he had suggested they eat gravel. But she sat. Milton waved Leona over. She shuffled to the table, dragging her blankets. These are spicy, Milton warned, opening a container. Juno says the vendor uses engine coolant for flavor, but I think she is lying, probably. He handed a pair of chopsticks to the Queen. Isolde held them like they were foreign weapons. I have never consumed street food, Isolde said stiffly. It is not screened for toxins. It builds character, Milton said. He took a bite. And immune systems, Leona giggled. It was a weak sound, but it was there. She took a bite. It tastes like burning, she said, smiling. That is the flavor of the lower city, Milton grinned. We call it survival spice. Isolde watched them. She watched Leona smile at Milton. She watched the ease with which they sat together. She looked at her own hands encased in the silver fabric of her suit. She took a bite. She chewed slowly, her face contorting. This is hideous, Isolde declared. Eat it anyway, Milton said. It burns my tongue. Good, Milton said. Focus on the burn. Stop focusing on the fear. Isolde looked at him. Really looked at him. And for a moment the Queen vanished and just a woman remained a woman eating bad noodles in a rusty room because a mechanic told her it would save her daughter. So, Milton said, turning to Leona, tell your mom about the time you tried to recalibrate the heater and almost set my eyebrows on fire. I did not, Leona protested, her tail twitching. I was improving the thermal efficiency. By bypassing the safety regulator, Milton raised an eyebrow. It was a calculated risk, Leona said, sounding exactly like Sigma 9. Isolde listened. She didn't interrupt to correct Leona's grammar or lecture her on safety. She just listened. And as the stories flowed, small, insignificant stories about broken toys and funny noises, machines made the tension in the room began to bleed away. After dinner, the mood shifted. Leona had fallen asleep on the makeshift cot in the corner, exhausted by the food and the laughter. Sigma 9 stood guard by the door in silent mode. Milton sat at the computer terminal he had salvaged from the station's control room. He was digging. What are you doing? Isolde asked. She was standing behind him. She had taken off her armored shoulder pads, looking smaller, more human. Research, Milton said. Raiden isn't just attacking you because he wants the throne. He is too smart for a simple coup. He likes the law. He likes to use the rules to strangle people. On the screen, lines of data scrolled by. Public records, court filings, guardianship transfers. I cross-referenced the air bonding audit results for the last 50 years, Milton explained, pointing at the screen. Look at the pattern. Every time a high-ranking noble family has a child who shows signs of emotional divergence or weak bonding, the custodian intervenes. The child is removed, placed in the institute. That is the law, Isolde said, to ensure strong leadership. Is it? Milton tapped a key. A new list appeared. Look at what happens to the families afterward. Within 5 years of the child being taken, the family's assets are liquidated. Their voting rights in the council are suspended. Their political power is absorbed by the office of the High Custodian. Isolde drew in a sharp breath. He is harvesting us, she whispered. He uses the audit to declare the heirs unfit, takes them as hostages to control the parents, and then dismantles the houses one by one. It is a long game, Milton said. He has been doing it for decades. He did it to the Duke of the Second Spire. He did it to the merchant lords. He paused, his finger hovering over a file dated 20 years ago. And he does it to commoners too, Milton said quietly. If they have something he wants, or if they are just in the way. He opened the file. Subject Vance Cale. Status ward of the state. Cause of removal, parental incompetence. Isolde read the name. Vance, that is your brother. He didn't take Cale because my parents were incompetent, Milton said, his voice cold. He took him because my father refused to sell his land to a shell company Ryden owned. Ryden needed the land for a server farm. So he filed a report. He said our house was unsafe. He took the kid to force the sale. Milton turned to face Isolde. My brother died in there, he said. Ryden doesn't care about the children. He doesn't care about the fading. He just wants the power that comes from holding the leash. Isolde's face hardened. The ice was back, but this time it wasn't the coldness of indifference. It was the coldness of a weapon being forged. I will kill him, she said. No, Milton said. If you kill him, the council will make him a martyr. They will say the Mad Queen murdered the protector of the law. You will lose everything, and Leona will be alone. Then what do we do? We beat him at his own game, Milton said. We don't use a sword. We use the truth. We will go to the audit tomorrow. And we don't just pass the test. We blow the curve. We show the city what a real family looks like, and we show them what Ryden has been hiding. But I do not know how to do that, Isolde admitted. Her voice trembled. I have studied the protocols. I know the correct angle to hold my head. I know the ceremonial words. But when I look at her, I freeze. I am so afraid of breaking her that I cannot touch her. Milton stood up. He walked over to the cot where Leona was sleeping. He gestured for Isolde to follow. Look at her, Milton whispered. Leona was curled in a ball, her hand clutching the mechanical hair. She doesn't need a queen, Milton said. She needs the woman who stood in my workshop and threw a table at a squad of Black Ops soldiers. She needs the woman who ate bad noodles just to make her daughter smile. Isolde looked down at her child. She reached out her hand, hovering over Leona's hair. I remember when she was born, Isolde whispered. The magnetic storm was so bad the palace shields were failing. I held her for 3 days straight because I thought the thunder would stop her heart. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just held her. That, Milton said fiercely. That right there. That is what you take to the stage tomorrow. Not the protocols. That memory. The fear. The fierce, irrational need to keep her safe. That is what the resonance machine measures. It doesn't measure perfection, Isolde. It measures connection. Isolde's hand descended. She touched Leona's hair. She stroked it gently. Leona stirred in her sleep, leaning into the touch. She feels warm, Isolde said, tears spilling onto her silver suit. Keep her warm, Milton said. He walked back to the table and picked up the forged document. He held it up to the light. We cannot use this, Milton said. It is a trap. If Ryden sees it, he wins. He moved to the waste disposal unit and dropped the papers in. The incinerator flared, turning the clumsy forgery and the crooked seal into ash. So we have no backup plan, Isolde said, not looking away from her daughter. We have one, Milton said. Me. He pulled out a small, battered notebook from his pocket. It wasn't an official document. It was just a logbook he used for parts. I am going to the audit, Milton said. I am going to sit in the witness box. And if Ryden tries to pull a legal stunt, I am going to testify. I am going to tell the city about the Black Ops team. about the threats, and I am going to release the data I just found about the other families. They will arrest you, Isolde said. Raiden controls the courts. Let them, Milton said. It will buy you time. It will cause a scene. Raiden hates scenes he cannot control. Isolde turned to him. Why? She asked. Why are you doing this for us? We are nothing to you but trouble. Milton looked at the sleeping girl, then at the Queen, who was finally learning to be a mother. Because, Milton said, his voice rough, I couldn't save my brother. But I can fix this. The night wore on. The station creaked and groaned in the wind. Milton sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, watching the two of them. Isolde had fallen asleep in the chair next to the cot, her hand still resting on Leona's arm. It was a strange tableau. A queen, a princess, a mechanic, and a sarcastic robot hiding in a tin can in the sky. Observation, Sigma 9 whispered. The robot had dimmed his lights to a soft amber. This unit detects a 99% probability that you have formed an emotional attachment, Milton. Shut up, Sigma, Milton whispered back. Acknowledged. Shutting up. But silence did not last. Around 3 in the morning, a sound woke Milton. It was a gasp. A sharp intake of breath that sounded like air rushing into a vacuum. He was on his feet instantly. Leona, Isolde, was already awake. She was standing over the cot, her hands shaking. She is going, Isolde cried. Milton rushed over. Leona was fading. It wasn't the subtle transparency of the workshop. This was catastrophic. Her legs were almost invisible. The cot beneath her was clearly visible through her torso. Her face was a pale sketch of light, flickering in and out of existence. Leona. Milton grabbed her hand. It felt like holding smoke. There was no resistance. His fingers passed through hers. Milton. Leona's voice sounded like it was coming from a long way away through a bad radio connection. I can't feel the floor. Stay with us, Milton barked. Focus on my voice. Look at me. It is the pre-audit anxiety, Dr. Halden said, rushing in with a scanner. Her cortisol spiked in her sleep. It triggered a cascade failure. The bond is dissolving. Fix it, Isolde screamed. Do something. I can't, Halden yelled back. We need an anchor, something physical. Something she can hold on to that feels real. Milton looked around. The hair. No, it was just a toy. The Queen Isolde was radiating panic, and panic was contagious. Leona's eyes were drifting closed. I am tired, she whispered. It is so quiet here. No sleeping, Milton shouted. He grabbed the mechanical hair from the cot and shoved it into Leona's chest. It fell through her body and clattered onto the mattress. She was intangible. She is leaving, Halden said, her voice hollow. She is gone. No, Milton snarled. Not on my watch. He reached into his pocket. He didn't have the forged papers. He didn't have a weapon. He pulled out the only thing he had left. A small, grease-stained wrench. The first tool he had taught her to use. The one she had used to loosen the bolt on the thruster. Leona, Milton said. He didn't try to hold her hand. He held the wrench up to her eye level. The bolt, Milton said, his voice commanding, steady, the voice of a teacher. The bolt is rusted, Leona. It is stuck. You have to persuade it. Do not force it. Listen to it. Leona's flickering eyes opened. She saw the wrench. It hurts, she whispered. I know it hurts, Milton said. Fixing things always hurts. Your knuckles bleed. Your back aches. But you don't quit. You are stubborn. Remember, you are the most stubborn kid in Rustlight Alley. He moved the wrench closer to her ghostly hand. Grab the tool, Leona, Milton ordered. Grab it. If you can hold the tool, you are real. If you are real, you stay. Isolde watched, holding her breath. Sigma 9 zoomed in, his servos silent. Leona's hand, a wisp of white mist, reached out. It hovered over the steel handle. I can't, she breathed. Yes, you can, Milton said. You are not a princess right now. You are my apprentice, and I do not tolerate lazy apprentices. Grab the wrench. It was a battle of will against physics. Leona frowned. The gold in her eyes flared brighter. She focused. She poured every ounce of her remaining consciousness into the idea of that wrench. The idea of grease. The idea of metal. The idea of Milton. Her fingers curled. For a second, they passed through the metal. Then a spark. A flash of blue light. Her fingers solidified. Skin met steel. She gripped the wrench. The solidity rushed back into her body like a shockwave. Her legs reappeared. Her chest became opaque. The color flooded back into her cheeks. She gasped, sucking in a lungful of air, and squeezed the wrench so hard her knuckles turned white. "I have it," she panted. Milton slumped against the wall, sweat dripping from his forehead. Isolde fell to her knees, burying her face in the mattress, sobbing uncontrollably. "Good job," Milton choked out. "Good grip." Leona looked at him. She was solid. She was there. But she looked terrified. "Milton," she whispered, still clutching the tool like a lifeline. "I almost didn't come back." "But you did," Milton said. "Next time," she said, her voice trembling. "Next time the wrench won't be enough. The audit, if I get scared on that stage, I will vanish in front of the whole city." She looked at her mother, then at Milton. "If I go," Leona said, "don't let Mother turn back to stone. Please. Make sure she keeps eating noodles." Isolde looked up. "I am not going anywhere," she swore fiercely. "And neither are you." "We have 6 hours until the audit," Milton said, checking his chrono. His hands were finally shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. He looked at the wrench in Leona's hand. "Keep that," he said. "Take it on stage with you. Hide it in your dress. When you feel yourself fading, you squeeze that steel and you remember that you are real." "And the signature?" Leona asked. "The papers are gone." Milton looked at the empty table. "The paper was just a symbol," Milton said. "The signature isn't ink, Leona. It is this." He pointed to the wrench, then to the Queen, then to himself. "We are the signature, and tomorrow we are going to write it so big that Ryden won't be able to erase it." But deep down, Milton knew the truth. The wrench was a band-aid. The Queen's love was powerful, but it was fragile. They were walking into a lion's den, and the lion made the laws. Tomorrow, words wouldn't be enough. Tomorrow, someone was going to have to bleed to make this stick. "Get some rest," Milton said. "Tomorrow is a work day." The Hall of Ascendance was not built for human comfort. It was built to intimidate gods. The ceiling was a vast dome of transparent aluminum, revealing the violent, swirling violet heart of the magnetic storm that raged outside. The sound was deafening, a constant rhythmic thrum that vibrated in the marrow of every bone. Inside, the air was cold and smelled of ozone and ancient incense. Thousands of eyes watched from the tiered galleries. The nobility of Vera Ascendant, draped in shimmer silk and jewels, sat in judgment. They were silent, their faces masked by courtly indifference, waiting for the show to begin. In the center of the obsidian floor stood Queen Isolde and Leona. They looked impossibly small against the scale of the architecture. Isolde wore her full, ceremonial regalia, a stiff, high-collared gown of white and silver that looked more like armor than clothing. Leona wore a miniature version, her tail tucked uncomfortably beneath the heavy fabric, her hands hidden in her sleeves. High Custodian Ryden stood on a raised dais, looking down at them like a biologist examining a specimen under a microscope. He wore robes of deep crimson, the color of dried blood. "We begin the final phase of the air bonding audit," Ryden's voice boomed, amplified by the hall's acoustics. "The question before this tribunal is simple. Is the biological vessel known as Leona Vera capable of sustaining the consciousness required for the throne? And is the current Guardian Queen Isolde capable of anchoring that consciousness through emotional resonance?" He smiled. It was a terrifyingly polite smile. Or, Ryden continued softly, is this a case of a mother clinging to a ghost? Isolde stood rigid. I am ready, High Custodian. Are you? Ryden stepped down from the dais. He walked around them, his footsteps echoing. Let us examine the logs. You claim a maternal bond, yet records show you spend 18 hours a day in the council chamber. You have missed 72% of the princess's evening meals in the last year. You rely on tutors, droids, and staff. He stopped in front of Leona. The girl was shaking. The storm outside was wreaking havoc on her stability. Her edges were already blurring. Tell me, child, Ryden said, leaning in. Do you know your mother's favorite color? Do not look at her. Look at me. Leona swallowed hard. It is silver, the color of the state, Ryden tutted. Incorrect. A true daughter would know that before she was queen, Isolde loved the blue of the deep-sea nebula. But you do not know Isolde, do you? You know the queen. I know her, Leona squeaked. She clutched her dress. Hidden beneath the silk, her hand was gripping the cold steel of Milton's wrench, so hard her fingers ached. I am real. I am real. Your bio-readings suggest otherwise, Ryden said, pointing to a massive holographic display hovering above the hall. It showed two waveforms, Isolde's and Leona's. They were out of sync, jagged. Fear, anxiety, dissociation. This is not a family unit. This is a stress fracture waiting to shatter. Stop it, Isolde said, her voice tight. You are deliberately frightening her. I am applying pressure, Ryden countered. The throne is pressure. If she cannot handle a few questions, how will she handle the crown? He turned to the crowd. The law is clear. An unstable heir is a danger to the city. If the parent cannot provide a grounding environment, the state must intervene. Leona stumbled. The floor seemed to tilt. The storm outside roared louder, and her vision grayed. She coughed that dry, static cough, and for a second her legs vanished. She fell. Leona! Isolde screamed. The queen dropped to her knees. She forgot the ceremony. She forgot the thousands of watching eyes. She grabbed her daughter's shoulders. Stay with me, little star, Isolde whispered, using the name she had promised never to use in public. Breathe. Just breathe. A gasp went through the hall. Little Star. It was a peasant nickname, a lapse in protocol. Ryden's eyes lit up. He had what he wanted. Protocol breach, Ryden announced, his voice slicing through the murmur. Emotional inconsistency detected. The queen reverts to infantile coddling when faced with crisis. She is unfit. He raised a hand. A drone floated down, projecting a hologram for all to see. It was a document, the forged guardianship paper. And here is the final proof, Ryden declared. We intercepted this digital transmission yesterday, a desperate, clumsy attempt to forge a guardianship transfer. The princess herself tried to sign away her royal status to a phantom, a blank line. Isolde froze. She looked at the hologram. It was the evidence of their failure. She does not want to be here, Ryden shouted, his voice rising to a crescendo. She tried to run away. She tried to invent a father because the mother she has is insufficient. There is no second guardian. There is no family. There is only a dying child, and a queen who has failed her. No, Leona cried out. The shame hit her like a physical blow. The wrench slipped from her sweaty hand. Clang. The steel tool hit the obsidian floor. The sound rang out pure and sharp, cutting through the chanting. Leona looked at the wrench. It lay there just out of reach. Her anchor. She reached for it, but her hand passed through the air. She was fading. Look! Someone in the crowd shouted. Leona was becoming transparent. The lights of the hall shone through her chest. She was a ghost, a flicker of light about to be extinguished. Sigma, Leona whispered, but the robot was not there. Milton. It is done, Ryden said, his voice dripping with mock sorrow. Custodial guards secure the asset before she dissipates. Take her to the Institute stasis chamber. We will stabilize her. Guards in black armor moved forward. Isolde tried to shield her daughter, but she was pulled back by the sheer force of the law. "Do not touch her," Isolde shrieked, struggling against two guards. "She is my daughter." "She is state property," Raiden replied coldly. "Correction," a voice said. It was not a loud voice. It was not amplified. But it carried a weight that made the guards hesitate. Milton Vance stepped out from the shadows of the lower gallery entrance. He was not wearing court robes. He was wearing his mechanic's coveralls, stained with oil and scorch marks. He walked down the central aisle, his heavy magnetic boots clicking against the obsidian floor. "Who is this intruder?" Raiden demanded. "Guards, remove this filth." "I am a citizen of Vera," Milton said, continuing to walk. He didn't look at Raiden. He looked at Leona, who was a shivering wisp of light on the floor. "And I have a standing appointment." He stopped between the Queen and the High Custodian. He looked at the guards, holding Isolde. "Let her go," Milton said. The guards looked at Raiden. Raiden laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "This is the father," Raiden mocked. "The mechanic from the sump. I heard rumors, Isolde, but I did not think you were this desperate. You bring a grease monkey to the royal audit." Milton ignored him. He knelt down next to Leona. He didn't try to touch her. He picked up the wrench from the floor. He held it out. "You drop this," Milton said softly. Leona looked at him. Her eyes were terrified. "I can't hold it, Milton. I am not real." "You are real," Milton said. "Because I can see you. And I don't see ghosts. I fix machines. And you, kid, are the most complicated machine I have ever met." He placed the wrench on the floor, right next to her hand. "Grab it when you are ready," he said. He stood up and faced Raiden. "You said there was no second guardian," Milton said, his voice projecting to the top of the dome. "You said no one wants the riddle of the royal family. You said she is a burden." "She is a liability," Raiden spat. "Look at her. She is defective. No sane citizen would sign their name to that mess. It is social suicide. It is financial ruin." Raiden gestured to the empty air. "There is no signature on the paper mechanic. Because nobody loves a dying thing enough to ruin their life for it." Milton reached into his coveralls. He pulled out a pen, a cheap plastic stylus he used for marking parts. "Is that the official registry?" Milton asked, pointing to the glowing lectern where the legal document sat. "It is," Raiden sneered. "Not that you are permitted to touch it." Milton walked up the stairs to the dais. The guards moved to stop him, but Raiden waved them off. He wanted this. He wanted the public humiliation. He wanted the mechanic to try and fail. Milton stood over the registry. The document was a holographic interface. Guardian acceptance form. Status pending second signatory. "If your law says a child has to die because she is lonely," Milton said, looking into the camera drone that was broadcasting his face to the entire city, "then your law is broken. And I fix broken things." "You are a nobody," Raiden hissed. "You have no title. You have no land. You are nothing." "I am Milton Vance," he said, "and I am family." He pressed the stylus to the holographic pad. He didn't just write his name, he carved it, Milton Vance. The interface flashed green. A chime rang out, pure, clear, and absolute. Guardianship bond confirmed. Species, human, felinoid. Status legal. The silence in the hall was absolute. "You fool," Raiden whispered. "Do you know what you have done? You have just bound yourself to a corpse. When she fades, you will be liable for the loss of a royal asset. I will bury you in debt for 1,000 years." Milton turned to face the crowd. "I signed," Milton said. "She is my daughter now, legally. And under the Interspecies Protection Act of 2309, any dispute regarding the custody of a cross-species minor must be settled by public tribunal. Right here. Right now." Ryden's face went pale. He knew the law. He had written the loopholes into it. But he hadn't expected anyone to trigger that specific clause. "Tribunal," Ryden scoffed, recovering quickly. "Fine. Let us have a tribunal. I accuse you, Milton Vance, of manipulation, of preying on a vulnerable queen, of seeking to elevate your station by stealing a princess." Ryden pointed a finger at Milton. "You are a con artist, you are a thief, you have no interest in the child. You only want the power." Milton stood his ground. He looked at Isolde. She was free of the guards now. She had rushed to Leona and was holding her, really holding her. Leona was sobbing, but she was solidifying. The wrench was clutched in her hand. "Power?" Milton asked. He reached into his pocket again. "You want to talk about power, Ryden?" He pulled out a data drive. It was small, old, and battered. "I did some digging last night," Milton said. "Into the archives you thought were deleted. The archives from the Department of Familial Correction." Ryden stiffened. "That data is classified." "Not anymore," Milton said. He tossed the drive to the drone operator. "Play it." "Do not," Ryden shouted. But the operator, a young technician who looked terrified, plugged it in. The massive holographic screen above the hall changed. It wasn't a graph anymore. It was a list. Thousands of names, dates, and video logs. The face of a young boy appeared on the screen. He was crying, being dragged away by men in black uniforms. "That is my brother," Milton said, his voice cracking for the first time. "Cale Vance, taken 20 years ago. Reason, parental incompetence. Real reason, my father wouldn't sell his land to your shell corporation." Another video. A noble girl screaming as she was put into a stasis pod. "Lady Alara," Milton narrated. "Taken 10 years ago. Reason, emotional instability. Real reason, her father voted against your budget increase." The crowd began to murmur. The murmur grew into a roar. "He doesn't protect children," Milton shouted, pointing at Ryden. "He holds them hostage. He uses the audit to break families, so he can steal their power. He tried to do it to me. He tried to do it to the Queen. And he is doing it to you." Ryden backed away. "Lies, deep fakes. This is treason." "It is the truth," Isolde's voice cut through the chaos. She stood up, pulling Leona with her. Leona was weak, but she was standing. She was solid. "I have seen the financial records. Every family that failed the audit had their assets transferred to the custodian's private accounts within 6 months." Isolde looked at her people. "He is not a guardian. He is a parasite." The nobles in the gallery stood up. They were angry. They were powerful. And they were looking at Ryden with the eyes of predators, who realized they had been hunted. "Guards!" Ryden screamed. "Arrest them, all of them!" The guards did not move. They looked at the Queen. They looked at the evidence scrolling on the screen. "Captain," Isolde said, her voice regal and calm. "Arrest High Custodian Ryden for crimes against the Crown and the people." The captain of the guard turned to Ryden. He raised his rifle. "You heard Her Majesty," the captain said. Ryden looked around wildly. The game was up. The mask had fallen. "You cannot do this," Ryden shrieked as the guards grabbed him. "I am the law without me. This city falls into chaos. That child is broken. She will never hold the throne." Milton walked over to Ryden as they dragged him away. "She doesn't need to hold the throne yet," Milton said quietly. "She just needs to hold a wrench." Ryden was dragged out screaming threats that faded into the distance. The hall fell silent again. The storm outside seemed to pause, as if the planet itself was taking a breath. Milton turned to Isolde and Leona. They stood there, the three of them, amidst the ruins of the ceremony. Leona looked at Milton. She held up the wrench. She smiled. It was a watery, tired smile, but it was the most beautiful thing Milton had ever seen. "You signed?" she whispered. "I signed," Milton said. "No refunds." Leona let out a laugh that turned into a sob, and she threw herself at him. This time, there was no hesitation. She hit him with the force of a cannonball. She was solid. She was heavy. She was warm. Milton caught her. He wrapped his arms around the kid who had walked into his shop with a broken toy and a broken heart. Isolde stepped forward. She didn't care about the cameras. She didn't care about the protocol. She wrapped her arms around both of them. And for the first time in the history of Vera Ascendant, under the cold lights of the palace, a family stood together. A mechanic, a queen, and a cat girl. And nobody faded away. Epilogue 1. The Home Workshop. 6 months later. The sign above the door in Rustlight Alley had changed. It no longer said Milton's Repairs. It was a hand-painted sign done in bright, messy letters that were clearly the work of a child. Home Workshop. We fix things. Even the really broken ones. Inside, the place was still a mess, but it was a happy mess. The floating fridge was finally grounded, repurposed as a bookshelf for ancient paper manuals. Milton was under the hood of a hover van, swearing softly at a hydrospanner. Language, a voice called out. Isolde sat at the workbench. She was not wearing a crown. She was wearing grease-stained overalls that were 2 sizes too big for her. She was scrubbing a fuel injector with a toothbrush. I said fudge, Milton lied, emerging from the engine. You did not, Leona said. She was hanging upside down from the rafters, her tail twitching. She was holding a data pad. I recorded it. It was definitely the other word. Snitch, Milton grumbled. I am a princess, Leona corrected, dropping down to the floor with cat-like grace. She looked healthy. Her skin glowed with life. The fading was gone, cured not by medicine, but by the relentless, chaotic, messy presence of people who refused to let her go. It is my duty to uphold standards. Your duty is to finish your homework, Isolde said, pointing the toothbrush at her. Or no flying lessons on Saturday. But Mom, Leona groaned. Algebra is useless. Sigma can calculate vectors in a nanosecond. Sigma is not going to be ruling the kingdom one day, Isolde said. Debatable. Sigma 9 rumbled from the corner. The robot had been polished. He gleamed. He was wearing a massive bow tie welded to his chest plate. I have excellent policy ideas regarding mandatory nap times. Milton wiped his hands on a rag. He looked at them. His wife, his daughter, his annoying robot. He walked over to the window. The magnetic storm was still there high above, but down here the lights of the alley were warm. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a builder. And he had built something that would last. Epilogue 2. The Wedding. The wedding was small. It was held in the royal gardens, a biodome filled with luminous plants that hummed when you touched them. There were no press drones, no dignitaries. Just Juno, who wore a dress that clashed violently with her blue hair. Dr. Halden, who checked everyone's pulse out of habit, and the staff of the workshop. Milton stood at the altar. He wore a tuxedo that felt like a straitjacket. Isolde walked down the aisle. She wore white, simple and flowing. She looked like the moon. Leona stood between them, holding the rings. She was beaming so hard, she practically illuminated the room. Do you, Milton Vance? The officiant began. I do, Milton said. He didn't hesitate. And do you, Isolde Vera? I do, she said. When they kissed the biodome, lights flared in approval. Juno let out a wolf whistle that probably violated several royal decrees. Speech, Juno yelled. Come on, Milton. Say something sentimental, make me sick. Milton laughed. He raised a glass of synthetic champagne. I fix machines, Milton said. Machines are easy. They have manuals. This, he gestured to Isolde and Leona. This came without instructions, but I think we are figuring it out. To the broken things that find a way to work. To the broken things, everyone cheered. As the party started, Sigma 9 approached the happy couple. The robot looked solemn. "Attention," Sigma announced. "I have a wedding gift. It has been sealed in my memory core for 12 years. Encryption level king's eyes only. Trigger condition, the marriage of the queen to a human resonance carrier." Isolde froze. "My husband, the late king." "He left a message." "Affirmative," Sigma said. He opened his chest panel. A small holographic projector whirred to life. A face appeared. It was a man with kind eyes and Leona's ears. King Aurelius. "Isolde," the hologram said. His voice was warm. "If you are seeing this, then I am gone. And if you are seeing this, it means you found him. The anchor." Isolde grabbed Milton's hand. "I knew about the fading," the king continued. "It runs in my bloodline. I knew Leona would have it. And I knew that our royal biofield was too compatible with the storms. We drift away too easily. We need grounding. We need something dense, something stubborn, something human." The hologram turned, seeming to look right at Milton. "I spent years looking for a genetic marker," the king said. "A human lineage that possesses a natural resonance-dampening field. A soul so solid, so stubbornly attached to reality, that it acts as a gravity well for others. I found one family. The Vance family." Milton's breath caught in his throat. "I tried to bring the Vances to the palace," the king said sadly. "But Ryden found out. He feared the connection. He knew that a human-bonded heir would be immune to his manipulation. So he took them away. He took the boy Kale. I thought I had failed." The king smiled sadly. "But I left a breadcrumb. I programmed the Royal Guard droid's specifically Sigma unit to scan for that resonance signature. I knew that one day, if fate was kind, Leona might wander into the path of the one person who could keep her feet on the ground." The hologram looked at Isolde. "It wasn't an accident, my love. Leona didn't find a mechanic by chance. She found the other half of her soul's equation. She found the gravity she needed." The image flickered. "Be happy," King Aurelius said, "and tell the mechanic thank you for signing." The hologram faded. Silence stretched across the garden. Milton looked at his hands. The hands that had fixed toys. The hands that had fought soldiers. The hands that had signed the paper. He wasn't just a random guy who got lucky. He was the anchor. He was the gravity. Isolde looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "You were meant to be here," she whispered. "All along." Leona ran over and hugged them both. "I told you," Leona mumbled into Milton's coat. "I told you that you were the only one who could fix it." Milton hugged them back, holding them tight against the turning of the world. "Yeah," Milton said, looking up at the stars through the dome. "I guess I was." He looked at Sigma 9. "Good robot," Milton said. "I try," Sigma beeped. "Now shall we commence the dancing? I have downloaded a program called The Funky Chicken. I believe it is culturally significant." As the robot began to gyrate on the dance floor, and laughter filled the air, Milton Vance, guardian husband, father, and mechanic smiled. The storm was over. The work was done. And for the first time in his life, everything was perfectly, beautifully fixed.